Welcome back to Hacker Hangouts on a Saturday morning, and we have so much we want to talk about. Everything from like DEF CON, kind of a reaction to a video we saw. I want to kind of bring it to like, we'll say the hacker ethos and kind of our thoughts, I think, which are connected to that. We have requests, which is if you're watching this video not live, we will add timestamps down below at some point in the future because we're actually professionals and we edit these videos afterwards, and it's not just all live with audio issues and everything else.
Consummate professionals.
Consummate professionals.
Consummate
peas. I also apologize again. I caught another cold and it's fantastic. So like if I have like a coughing fit or something like that, I will mute out. But if there's just like a string of silence, we can all enjoy that together as a growing opportunity. I don't know. So I actually sent I went to send a link out to this video. So I want to just jump into this like concept of there was a video that came out, which popped up in my feed weirdly enough and was titled like DEF CON sucked. And I was interested and I watched the video, and if it was actually, I will say this, it was a very well produced video. He was very articulate. It wasn't impassioned. It was him sharing his opinion. So if you do go find it afterwards, please don't give him hate or anything like that. Just like he was sharing his opinion, which is what we're doing right now. And he brought up like a ton of different points. And some of them I wanted to talk about because I actually think like they align a little bit with me. And then there's other ones I just absolutely disagree with. So let's start with the topic. He talks about things like the venue. Let's just kind of like he started out talking about what he remembers DEF CON being. It was his first DEF CON. It was like DEF CON 14. And he's like, it was a small, seedy venue. They played Spot the Fed. It was people running around with 40s in their hand, duct taped to their hands. And this was the culture. And now it's flipped corporate. And I started thinking about the seedy venue thing because I remember my first DEF CON, I think, was DEF CON 16. And it was like, that was the story. I have a video of it on my channel talking about like my parents came because I couldn't reserve a hotel. I was too young. And they were introduced to Circus, which was an interesting experience when I think previously they stayed at the Bellagio. But there was something to be said about the seedy hotel at the Riviera and then later at Riv, and even Paris Bally's not being seedy, but there was no lights in there. And then you go to the Caesar Forum, and it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. There's lights there. There's huge windows, natural light, and it doesn't feel like someone's basement. It starts feeling, so I can almost like ignoring the conference completely, I can see why it feels corporate because it doesn't feel dirty there. What was your guys' thoughts on that?
Gator.
I will say, as everything, the one thing that is constant in life is change. So, I mean, of course, as my first DEF CON was DEF CON 17. So I have the same background of, hey, we started at the Riv, and that was the one place on the strip that would let minors go through and actually get a room, because that was the first year I was there. I'm like, oh, next year, this might be a problem. So the going to Riv was interesting. Having it change over time, yes, obviously, because we're talking about more people. We're talking about having just how many more physical people being there as well, interacting with folks, right? Because I want to say in the early days, I don't think we broke 20,000 people. I want to say that we were under that for the longest time. I wasn't paying attention back in those days about how many people were actually attending DEF CON at that point in time.
I mean,
so this is I want to poke on this real quick. You're like, oh man, it never really got above 20,000 people. What's the difference between 20,000 people and 30,000 people?
So venue,
right?
would be my only question with line. Right.
Yes, but like functionally in terms of it being it. So there's the ambiance of it, if you will. But
Sure.
like, what really functionally has changed between 20 and 30,000 people in terms of the culture? Like, those numbers are closer together than they are farther apart.
That's true. That is completely true. I would say attending and going to different conferences, depending on which venue that we are at, how it grew is how long you would be in line to go to something. And I will say, from one of the folks that came to DEF CON for the first or second time, some of their feedback was, Gator, you told me to only pick 1 or 2 things to go do a day. I tried to pick 6, and by the first day, I was frustrated because I couldn't get from X to Y in time, and then there was a line that was 4 hours long, so I was going to miss out. So then he was ready to pack up and throw it in at the end of Friday, but he's like, no, let's just try to scale things back and do a limited scope and only pick a couple things at a time to go after. And then he started having a lot better time getting deeper into the subjects that he wanted to work on versus running from one side of the conference all the way to the other side of the conference and barely making it.
Well, this was one of the other complaints he brought up in the video. Is there was a lot of people. There's a lot of people. There was lines at the vendor. There was lines at merch, which I will say there always is. But there was lines to all the different talks. And again, he was a little he was talking in passion, so he was a little all over the place. And I'm sectioning these out. I think this is. I was thinking about this one where there's lines everywhere because I remember with Gowrie, we went to that back hallway where vendors, merch, hardware, and it's the first time I have ever been anywhere where I was like, I feel this was like early before they put the line control and everything like that. Like they got better. This got better very fast. But it was the first time where we started going down the hall, and I go, I looked at Gowrie and I'm like, I'm a big dude. I'm a big dude. And it was like, I feel unsafe because you started hearing the murmuring of people getting very upset. And then it's boxed in and people were going, okay, even though I have a red shirt, they're not letting me through, which is, again, people are upset. And I'm like, okay, I want to leave. This is not worth us fighting the crowd all the way down there. And they did fix it. But I was thinking about this going like, how would DEF CON how do they fix the people? How do they, but I was thinking about this going, Caesar's Forum, this is our quote unquote second year, but I'd actually argue this is our first year. And here's why. We had safe mode, which happened. We then had the year after safe mode, which is one of my favorite DEF CONs because we had this giant space with like 7,000 people. That was so much fun. And that was fun for a whole variety of different reasons, nothing to do with DEF CON. And then the year after this, which would have been 2 years ago, was Caesar's Forum, but it was still, we'll say, a COVID year. And I know, like, let's blame COVID, but like, it was still a COVID year. Everyone's emotions were running hot for every number of reasons, politically, COVID, all of that. It was a new space, which we have never been to before. Everyone had a learning thing. So like it was a mess. And again, it was kind of in a fun way a mess, but you had this whole like dichotomy of where stuff is. It takes a year or two to understand where stuff is. So I'd put this as like, we'll say the first year after that year where they might have had their stuff together. But I think DEF CON learned some valuable lessons, which was like merch, vendors, don't put those in the same hallway. Soldering Skills Village and hardware hacking. Like I love those people who go to Soldering Skills and hardware hacking, but it is a different breed of hacker who goes to that space because unlike other people who go, oh, I'm going to go visit this. I'm going to go visit the AI village. And while you get those subset of people who go there and just spend their whole con there, hardware hacking, like that is their village. Like they go there, they set up camp there, and they never leave, which is awesome in some ways. But the crowd which goes to hardware hacking, Soldering Skills, merch, like it was, I think DEF CON learned a lot about lines this year more than any other year. And this is their first year figuring out, like, you have this iterative process that happens in hacking. I'm going to screw up. I'm going to fail. I'm then going to compile and fix it. And then I think this is their first year to find a lot of their weak points because they didn't do that the previous year.
We moved from the ambiance to logistics. Stepping back to the ambiance of it, there was the implication that the culture used to be running around with 40s taped to your hands and you're in a seedy place. And somewhat of the implication is that hackers used to be chaotic neutral, if you will, and they are no longer chaotic neutral because either it got too big or the culture has moved on. And I think to some extent there's a good point there. Like a lot of hacker culture, and I know I'm painting with broad strokes here, is looking at systems and saying, how do I break this? And so that's why I come up with the chaotic neutral. You don't really care why the system is or how important the system is. All you care about is how do I break said system, because I'm curious, right? So chaotic neutral in that sense. And the implication of it no longer being like that is starting to pop up in more places. So he brought it up from the standpoint of it's gotten too big, it's corporate now. We're seeing what is the new room where the TSA was, exhibitors. There's exhibitors now, which means we're turning into that type of conference. Is the core of what DEF CON used to be moving away? And I would ask the question, and this is an open question, is it necessarily bad for DEF CON to change in that way? And I think the follow-up to it is can a conference like DEF CON from 20 years ago actually sustain itself in modern society? There's a lot of shenanigans that happened probably pre-DEF CON 15 that would probably land you in jail today for a variety of reasons, whether it would be considered forms of assault or it would be seen by Vegas PD as just not okay, and they would scoop you up rapidly. We've seen over the years that the feds are kind of, okay to a certain extent, letting the hackers do the hacker thing on stage. But in other cases, we've seen the FCC come in and say, if you turn that thing on, you're going to federal prison, right? Mm-hmm. Like we've seen over the years where those boundaries are. And I have to imagine the conference organizers have a pretty good idea of what's in bounds and what's out of bounds. And so the conference, if we want it to continue to exist, must evolve over time. And some of those shenanigans do need to go away.
I would say we'll say some of the shenanigans and the growth of the conference, I would agree. I think some of those things need to go away and do go away. I think the reason why some of those shenanigans have stopped happening, like let's use the example of a lot of the talks. One of the gripes, which was said in his call or his video, was a lot of people are saying, here is this cool vulnerability I found. It's since been patched, but here's the tool if you want to play around with it. A lot of them weren't releasing 0 days or releasing exploits. And I would argue that that was very rare at DEF CON, even when it was like the ATM hacks and whatnot. Like those were already released. I think it's rarer to find these. Maybe it was a little bit more common to find these, here's a vulnerability, here's the exploit code, go find it, because it was something like a very small piece of third party. I think the profitability of exploitation has gone significantly up. Bug bounties are now very common. You have research companies which now will release it. So like releasing it for free at DEF CON is kind of a silly maneuver, because if I can make money off of it, I can make a living off of bug bounty. Like it's amazing. One of my employees makes money on the side by doing bug bounty, and it's hilarious because he enjoys doing it, but it's like $500-$600 a month. It hits me as, I think when you're looking at DEF CON saying, has it evolved? I think it's going to be forced to evolve because of, we'll say, security has gone mainstream. Like these big hacks is now normal. I think stepping away from, we'll say, the 40 is wrapped around the hands, I'm all for that, because I think that represents a piece that like you can't be, I honestly can't be associated with. I just think there's better shenanigans to be had than embracing Vegas for what Vegas is. Like, I don't know. I guess I look at going not as judgment or anything like that, but simply just we're at the pinnacle of hacking right now with so many awesome, smart people. Why would I want to waste my time with that?
I'll add one more thing and then I'll hand it to Gator, which is the idea of getting on stage and saying, here's a Windows 10 or Windows 11 0-day vulnerability. It's not patched. Have fun. Would be largely scoffed at by the bigger security industry today if you did that, right? And they said, here's exploit code. Go have fun. Because the propagation of effects would be so fast today compared to 20 years ago that people have recognized that that is, while not illegal, it is definitely irresponsible and just kind of not cool anymore. It used to be
Mhm.
really cool. I think we've moved on from that.
Do you think it's because you've gotten older? Like, because you now
Uh,
recognize the amount of crap storm it creates when that happens? Or do you think it's
yeah,
culture?
but the real question is, do you think it's really because it's in part, part of your job to mitigate those scenarios? No, to an extent that I think it's a little bit what I am a little bit older and the chaos eventually does get tiring. But no, like to some extent the chaos is nice. We exist in it, right? But Gator, you had something.
So down this whole line, the whole responsible disclosure thing has become a lot more mainstream, to Silk's point, making sure that we've got the proper way of patching, making sure that we're letting folks know, trying to let the industry know in that trusted circle so people can patch, update, and then push that out before it hits mainstream, right? Uh, Not a lot of people necessarily understand that, so maybe that's part of the change in the culture. I would also go through and say DEF CON is still what you make it. If you
Yeah.
want to see something, you are enabled to do something. So if there's something missing, I would encourage folks to be able to go through and take the bull by the horns, right? If you want to go through and do some wild shenanigans at DEF CON, I mean, of course, we got the code of conduct, right? But there's still been some wild conversations that we've had, that we've done in the past, that still lead to that hacker culture, that still go arcing back to yonder years. So I would say, be the change that you want to see. If you see something missing, go do it.
Yeah, that's going to come back up. I'm taking a note because that's coming back up later for one of the other things that was brought up. Gowrie?
I do want to stick on the topic of basically cultivating culture, right?
Mm.
Let's rewind 30 years. Let's just think about the movie Hackers for a second, right? And like, what was the culture 30 years ago when DEF CON started with regards to hackers? By and large, the average person in America thought all hackers were evil, right? And so DEF CON, by to an extent, was an expression of counterculture where, think about the hacker oh
Manifesto.
good. Yeah, the hacker manifesto, which is like, my crime is that of curiosity. It's no longer a crime to be curious. Like, I don't know what society you live in anymore if you think that because DEF CON has become mainstream and all these things that we've lost some piece of our identity. No, man, if you open up today and say like, I am a hacker, people will be like, that's fucking cool. That's awesome, right? Not arrest him, right? Like that's the difference in society today. See, the idea that DEF CON would continue with that level of counterculture into modern society when the culture has largely accepted that counterculture is a little, I'm not going to say you need to get with the times, but like there is a little bit of nostalgia overpowering what DEF CON can be today, just based on the fact that a lot of the counterculture that used to be a place for misfits to go and find acceptance in their curiosity and, try to make it normal, succeeded in making it normal, right? Like, I would not say any of us on this stream or any of our watchers is an abnormal human being. I'm sure there's plenty of their managers would say that, but I would not say that. Because by and large, like year over year over year, we watch like, oh no, actually that individuality and that counterculture is incredibly valuable in a variety of ways. And the industry's developed around that. So, I do think we are at the point. The reason why we discussed the naming of this stream and adding the phrase "cultivating culture," which I like the alliteration, is because yes, the culture has changed. If you don't like it, consider attempting to change it to what you like. But if what you want the culture to be is people running around with 40s taped to your hands, that's not exactly a counterculture anymore. That's been happening since the 50s. Like drunks have existed for centuries.
It's funny because I look back to some of my first DEF cons and I realize things that you would look at as, oh, I don't want to say radical, like DEF CON's leading the world or anything like that, but you would hear whispers of things at DEF CON which you wouldn't see become mainstream later on. And I use the example of, what was it? Like, it wasn't mental health, like hackers, or there was some phrase in there where it was like there was a mental health village at one time for DEF CON. And this was like DEF CON 23, 4, like it was maybe a decade ago, but like that was like back at the time where mental health with like we can all acknowledge you have certain segments within cybersecurity which are massively stressful because I think so many of us, I think like standard operating procedure in this is most of us internalize our work. Like you think about your work after you leave. You have even programmers, this isn't just cybersecurity, technology in general, is you have a technology, you have a coding problem, you think about it all until you solve it. You have a process thread running in the back of your head forever. And I think we recognize that is a recipe for burnout. I have no idea. I'm just going to make up a statistic right now, but go for it. Is the amount of burnout that occurs within cybersecurity is probably among the top among a lot of other security or a lot of other professions. I mean, like air traffic controllers being like the exception. And DEF CON recognized there was, or someone in the community, I should say, I think it was, oh gosh, I know her name. It's right here. But she started the village, and it was mainly because we have a mental health issue. I have connections to make that happen. I'm going to go make a village of it. And that happened before, we'll say before mental health was cool. That is the thing I think where I start looking at DEF CON and go, they still are trailblazers. I think just a lot of the things are culture's moving faster. Cultivating culture, we said, okay, mental health is a big issue. It happened for 3 years, and then we all accept it going, yep, you're right, that is an issue. I think sometimes we're hitting this point of technology where it's moving so fast, like AI, for instance. Like the fact that we had an AI village, I think this was like the second year, maybe first year it was there. Like we're almost like playing catch up at this point because so much happens in 1 year that kind of happens. Does that make sense, Gator?
Yeah,
completely makes sense. And to your point of DEF CON having the counterculture, that's one of the things that I appreciate much about DEF CON is because there are so many different subcultures that are going on there all the time that are welcomed, right? People aren't going through and being picked on. You get to see all different sorts and types get together and do this. I remember going through and go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say Jason Street had such an awesome quote, which I think will help, which is you are a unique snowflake in a blizzard of snowflakes at DEF CON. And it was just like when he said that, I'm like, you know what, that is correct. Sorry, continue on.
Absolutely. So to your point of things being brought up in DEF CON culture and hackerdom, when it came to we are the cavalry, right? This was started a decade or more ago at this point by Josh, right? And so saying like, look, nobody's coming. You've got to be, you've got to do. And it had to do with mental health. It had to do with standing up to the C-level groups. It had to go through and making sure that you're getting the information to the people who need it to start making that change. Because if we don't drive it, this is culture on everything, right? It's not just DEF CON. It's literally in our jobs. It's in our culture. It is all encompassing. So yeah, you have anything from the mental health states and the different villages that went along with that to folks just talking about making sure that you're helping out and that you're looking out for your other hackers that are in the community, right? If something happens to one of our hacker family, there is an outpour of support for those people, whether it's Jacoby or whether it's going through and other folks who lost a family member. You see that going on. And it's because we do care for our folks, right? At least that's been my experience thus far.
I almost disagree with that in some way. Not saying that it doesn't happen, but I bring up that 90-10, which was, again, made up statistic. But that 90% of the people that go to DEF CON, it's an information security conference. And in some way, it's like JFK. Ask not what DEF CON can do for you, but what you can do for DEF CON. But is 90% of the people, it's an information security conference. And I think that 90% of the people who go justify it for the other 10% who see it as, this is my community, this is my people. Where you see those people year after year. And when they see you across the hallway, it's camp friends. That's the only way I can describe it. Is I go to a camp. I've been going there forever. It's where I met my wife. And you go up there, you see these people once a year, but immediately it's like instant kinship. And you've never met this person. I remember this year sitting down with Gowrie at a table at the Goon Party, and someone sat down next to us, and I had never met her before, but immediately you feel instant kinship because all of a sudden she's talking about the projects she's doing and all of this, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is one of my friends. This is now an instant friend of mine. And I think that's the piece.
Was it my friend? Because I basically I was like, here, sit down here. Everyone here will like you. And then like within 2 sentences, everyone was just like, this one is part of us now.
Yes. Yes, it was your friend. It was sat down and you're like,
yeah.
And it was like, there was again, oh gosh, the series ended so bad. It was like how have you met, or How I Met My Mother or something like that. And they would do this like pickup line, have you met Ted? And then he walks away and then it starts the connection. It was just like that. It was Gowrie's like, have you met her? And it was like, boop, yep, there we go. This is now the conversation. And I go back to where you're saying like everyone cares about each other there. Like, no, I think the 10% care about the 10%. Someone from the 90% can join the 10%. And I don't think anyone's like gatekeeping them. I think but I do think you're feeling this core community where I think vast majority of DEF CON doesn't feel it. And maybe I'm just trying to make myself feel special.
No, I think that there's a good thing. There's a good string to pull there because you hear a lot of these grumblings about DEF CON has changed. The people coming to DEF CON has changed. You know, we've joked a few times about the fact that Scav Hunt had the entry that said, you know, spot the Fed ? No, spot the hacker. And that's really a poke at DEF CON no longer being a place for hackers, but it turning into, in some way, an information security conference. But you still see the same people year over year. I mean, we interviewed, God, I can't remember his name, in QM, who got his 25-year patch this year of being a goon, right? Like there's a core group of people that have been helping to run DEF CON for a very long time. And by run DEF CON, I don't necessarily mean just goons or the actual staff. I also mean the people running the HHV or the people running contests. I think we do have to recognize we have some bias here because we've been trapped in many senses inside of the contest area for like a really long time. And so I would say that the culture in the contest area year over year has been basically the same, but the culture over in HHV and the regulars over in HHV is probably very different in terms of, it makes me wonder, like, is the spot the hacker entry on Scav Hunt a very contest area view of DEF CON? Whereas there's probably people in the HHV year over year just like hacking together in the traditional hacking sense, all kinds of nonsense, a handful of people. Is it rarer? Yeah. And I think part of that is the 90-10 split of most people who go see it as another information security conference, and you can argue the value because most people say it's in Vegas, ergo it's a party. And then there are the people who show up and see it as Hacker Summer Camp and the place to do nonsense with friends you see once a year. I think all of those viewpoints are totally valid. The only thing I'll say is, did DEF CON 31 suck? Maybe for him. It certainly didn't suck. Seriously, it certainly didn't suck for me. I think the first day Silk and I were there, we started doing videos the same way we did it the prior year. And we immediately, after like 3 videos, we were like, this sucks.
This feeling of this is going to suck. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we both looked at each other and we were like, well, let's not do DEF CON that way then. Let's just go, play Scav Hunt with a video camera. And that's what we did. We ended up more or less making the same videos we did the prior year, but in the context of Scav Hunt. And that changed the way we got to experience DEF CON. And in part, what made that so much fun was it changed the interactions from let's go to place X and talk to person M and get information from them into there's this nonsense entry on a scav hunt list. Let's go to the exact same place, talk to the exact same person, but then build a relationship with that person and actually give a shit what they're doing and this backstory behind this, while also having a little bit of fun and tying together some of those disparate parts of DEF CON. That's what I took away from it. And that's, Silk and I have talked a few times since then. If we went back and we did more of that, potentially in a documentary style thing, that's the way I would want to present it, is not the information of what is DEF CON, but kind of who is DEF CON. Right. In that, who is that 10% of shenanigan lovers, and what are those stories that have built up? What are all of these subcultures that have built up over time? So for the people that are coming that are still part of the 90%, as Silk said, like there's nothing gatekeeping you from getting in. In fact, most people running contests or villages or whatever would be like, "Oh, you want to help? Please, like
yes,
for the love of God, help." Take my job, right? It's how you get involved, and if your involvement is to show up, stand in lines, watch talks, that's fine. That's one way to experience DEF CON. Personally, I don't do that because that experience would suck for me. That's the reality.
There's a lot you've said, and I want to respond to, but it was interesting because when we started the DEF CON, I think so much of, we'll say, the person's video was a little obviously personal and things like that, but a lot of their frustration was because of a lack of understanding. And I guess that sounds so harsh, but let me use two examples. I think one, they got upset about the exhibitors hall going, oh, it's commercialized and all of that. And those were the first two videos. I think one of the first two videos Gowrie and I did. And we looked at each other saying, I have no interest in doing this. This is gross. Because we went there and we're like, oh, let's talk to Open VPN and let's talk to the TSA. And you kind of drop jokes, but it was just a commercial. It was them looking to hire there. And then even me and Gowrie were like, this is so gross. Why would DEF CON ever do an exhibitors hall? To find out later, I am now in favor of the exhibitors hall. And here's why. The exhibitors hall can exist. I will never go there unless it's for some actual purpose because I'm forced to go. But I'll never go. Why? Because it's an exhibitors hall. I don't care. But this thing was a great idea because DT, Dark Tangent, DEF CON didn't get any of the money from it. It went to content creators. And this isn't content creators oh, I'm a videographer, here's what I do. But content creators like contest runners. Gator, you guys got one meal a day covered for all of Darknet.
Which was awesome. Yep.
Yeah, it's expensive to eat in Vegas. And they get one meal covered. Every contest got one meal covered a day for all of their people who are creating content for DEF CON. Never happened before Exhibitors Hall did that. Second one is they gave tons of money to charities, to EFF. So all the money raised during it, they went to EFF. And then even DEF CON on top of it gave money to NUC. And NUC was the one who created the soda machine. That's Dual D and everything like that. That's his nonprofit. There is understanding that comes from that. Another one was the badge. Guy went on a big rant about the badge. And I want to say partially justifiably so on half of what he said. Half of what he said was, I didn't get an actual badge. I got this flappy plastic thing, and some people got paper. I want to say justifiably upset about that aspect, understanding that DEF CON's more than the badge, but then said something like this. Oh, and this woman made the badge. I'm like, that Mar had no understanding on who Mar is, in that she's responsible for all of the art at DEF CON. I mean, there's other artists, but the iconic art pieces that you see of those vectorized images is, again, probably not the proper term because I don't do art, but is all of those iconic images that you look of these cool environments and electronics, and most of her heart, if you saw it in the big digital thing, is she poured her heart and soul not only into the art, but also the badge. I don't even know anything about how she did the badge or anything like that, but I know from talking to MK Factor and other ones, and this is me getting on my soapbox, like almost upset on her behalf, which you know me, I'm like, people get upset on behalf of other people, a whole nother one, but I'm one of those people right now. But is that I know MK Factor and others who have poured their heart and soul in the badge. It's not like 3 weeks before conference I'm going to start. It is the entire year it encompasses. Right. And then the other thing is he made a comment, which is the badges are always electronic. They're always circuit boards. And having gone since DEF CON 14, it was on an every other year. Heck, one of my favorite badges was DEF CON 23, the card deck one. Lost made those card deck ones. Probably my favorite badge, one of my favorite black badges, but all of them on that whole side. But then, I will say, some of the non-electronic badges were a little, not even a swing and a miss, just, we'll say, a little too radical. Like things like the record player. I like the record. It was a cool idea, but it was just a pain to wear. But then there's like the cassette tape. There was like there was a couple other misses like the rubber one, but that was also because like that was a supply chain like last minute fix for it. That was not like a plan like, hey, we're going to do a rubber stamp this year. I get excited about, I think that's the thing I took exception to, is like, I get excited about the non-electronic badge years. I get excited about the electronic one. I get excited all the time, but like the electronic badges tend to be the same thing. MK Factors brought it farther. Joe Grand's 27. As I say this, I kind of pull back what I'm saying because they are actually all different. But the non-electronic badges, they're like, what do you expect with them? Cassette and record player. And then this one would introduce something new, which allowed Badge Life to create a new type of extension to a badge.
Absolutely. Well, it also had each badge came with its own code that you could place, and like the actual story behind it was what is it called? It's like
mosaic.
It's not a mosaic. It's the shape of the badge. Basically, each individual. You can't have a repeating pattern as you connect these things into different shapes. So you will never have a pattern that repeats as people connect these things. And there was a virtual online place where you could place your badge on the bigger mosaic. And the whole thing was each individual badge is going to be unique in that sense, where it's going to be part of the mosaic and there's non-repeating patterns, which is kind of a cool interpretation of you are a snowflake in a snowstorm of snowflakes, right? The type perception of it. So that's actually a pretty cool take, and not every badge needs to be this grand lost challenge that takes your entire weekend to solve. I think if the badge was that every year, it would get old. Mm-hmm. It would get really old, and it would make every single badge not special.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that.
To the badge point, yes, they have been TikToking for a long time between badge and non-badge, or electronic and non-electronic. I thought this year was interesting because Mar did go through, and the whole shard thing, you got so many more people interested in creating something, whether it was 3D printed, PCB, saw people do cardboard and stickers, right? You saw all types that were gone through and created. Did it stink that folks who stood in line didn't get the hard plastic versus the laminated versus paper? We know that is a risk. Thankfully, DT went through and stated that it wasn't from the lack of planning. It was unfortunately, the people who were going through and supplying it didn't deliver. By the end of the conference, you could go swap it out, but after you've bought your badge, how many of y'all are looking at the official DEF CON Twitter to go see, hey, you can go swap it out now? I would say probably few and far between for folks to be able to actually go back and get that.
I'll say, like, as much as it's a pain in the ass every year, like the badge is always a pain in the ass in one way, shape, or form. They do their best to do right by people, and the cost of getting into DEF CON is not just the badge, right?
Right.
Like go back and look at year over year what the badge is, and I'll bet you there are very few badges that probably cost more than $30 or $40 to actually create, right? Each individual badge. There's no way. Like that would be too much of an overhead and it would cause the price. So the majority of what you are paying for is to get into DEF CON. So if you think the value is just getting the badge, they're not rare anymore. So, DEF CON 1 badge, yeah, you could probably sell it online for a few $1,000s. A DEF CON 25 badge, it's probably, I don't know, $40 online. Something you could probably get one right now for $40 or something like that. I got a pile of badges literally in boxes to the right of me.
Yet the Darknet badge was selling for like $100 or $200 on eBay. I found that hilarious. That was amazing.
I found that hilarious and disgusting at the same time. Like that's the point where the whole economics of badges in general I was like, man, this used to just be a fun hobby, and now it's becoming very commercialized, and that kind of starts to put a bad taste in your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
For what it's worth, this was years past of other Darknet ones being sold online. I can say we donated to B-Sides on their silent auction, so everything went to EFF. And between 3 badges for the last 3 years, between Gulo's Arts and Crafts, Hacks and Crafts badge, the Damon face, and then the one for Meshtastic this year, we brought in over $2,000 donated to DEF CON for folks buying those 3 badges. So
really
awesome.
Didn't come to us. That was pretty fun.
Was the Arts and Hacks one sold individually or with a kit, like with other ones?
Each one was sold individually, and the Arts and Hacks brought in $500 worth of tokens for the So that was one of the random raffles, and $500 worth of tokens for just the Hacks and Crafts.
Oh,
that's awesome.
In the plastic bag.
That is amazing. That one, like, I don't know if you could ever like top that one, because it was like one of those things is year after year it was like, just immense, so much work, electronic badges, and I know there's a lot of work in there, but they show up and be like, free badge, and everyone's like, oh, it's a free badge, and then you're like, it comes to you in a Ziploc bag, and it wasn't like a like a troll, like, here you go, like it's like you suck type of thing. It was totally like a legitimate challenge. But when Gulo was like, oh yeah, and it includes your own special soldering spoon.
Oh yeah, no. So and there was a whole story behind that. Like Gulo, I love Gulo. I love Gulo at the deepest portions of my heart. He was worried for a very long while that the trolley aspect would not be well received by the community, and I had to. I was like, hey, dude, it's free, and 2, like, it's really fucking cool. Like, you have, copper tape that you are using as traces to build circuits. It's really fucking cool. Even though it's simple and it's something we for years prior, we were like, oh, blinky light badges. And then we were like, but what if make your own blinky light badge using arts and crafts? And we were like, fuck, that's a really good idea.
Full tilt.
We should do it. Right? Like, we were just like, you know what? If we're doing it hard. It's going to be free. Right. And like that, I remember Grifter getting on stage and being like, the reason functionally, they never really say why certain contests are black badge contests. This is the one year that I'm not pretty sure Grifter got up on stage and said, Darknet is a black badge contest because the arts and hacks and the nonsense that was going on in the contest area is really the essence of what we want DEF CON to be. It's learning, it's nonsense, it's creative, it's outside the box, it's all of those things, and it's a counterculture in the sense that badge life has become this giant money suck, and it's free, right? Like, there are so many parts of it that just undercut so much of what DEF CON had become. Going back to this other guy's video of it's become corporate, yes, and yet there's still this subculture within DEF CON that will occasionally do great things, and Gulo is part of that, and that's why I love him dearly. He was just like, oh, we need to do this, and we developed the idea together, but Gulo executed it, and he executed it beautifully. So all props to him on that.
Yeah, and then it was like, oh, we should do black bat. We could do a black badge with black construction paper.
It was black construction paper. It was beautiful. I think there was a handful of folks who got to that level that year because there was 3 level of badges. So there was that, hey, you follow the design circuit, you make your own. Now it's time to go 3D and making your own 3D badge out of wire. It was a lot of fun. So again, we were trying to go through and be the change that we want to see because it is changing from year over year, right?
I think, I mean, so yeah, as you say, it's changing year after year. Braden brought up a point like way back earlier in the stream. I'll throw it up. Funny you mentioned HHV. If I remember correctly in the stream before at DEF CON, you liked the idea of HHV being in the forum. You're right. I thought it was awesome because I don't want to walk to the Flamingo because it's a gazillion miles away in the Vegas heat. It's not that far. It's not that far. But I'm a big guy carrying a lot of equipment, mostly, and I say me carrying a lot of equipment. It's really Gowrie carrying a lot of equipment, but I feel exhausted that he's carrying it. And when we're walking on over to Flamingo's a long way. So I love the idea of SSV and HHV being at the forum, but in practicality, I think it was a terrible idea in hindsight. I hope they do it again, mainly because I like HHV and I don't want to have to walk all the way over there. I think it was a bigger space, all of that. But I think there is this constant pendulum of learning at DEF CON going, this made a lot of sense on paper. This was a terrible idea, in having the retrospective to go, okay, let's move this, let's move this, let's move this. And I think like you learn every year. Every one of these things is DEF CON's learning. And I still see this as, even though it was the second year at Caesars Forum, it was very much felt like a first year at Caesars Forum.
Yeah, the one last word on logistics, and I think we can move on from that. Yeah. But the core of the issue of that one hallway being an absolute nightmare was everything that could possibly have a line, like a bad line, was in that hallway. Right, HHV and SSV are there's always a ton of people there trying to get badge kits put together. So you have a bunch of people. You have a bunch of people not only waiting for soldering stations. You have people that are like, "Oh, I just bought something from the vendor area that I can go put together in. It's right next door." In theory, that's great. In practice, there's a limited amount of space in that hallway, right? And then when you have merch right across the hallway from that, generating its own massive line. Yeah. Okay. Oopsies.
Yeah.
What ultimately did it though was the staggered opening of different things. So while merch was open, I think an hour before the vendor area or something like that, you had this massive line generating from merch. And then on top of that, you had people waiting to get into the vendor area. On top of that, you had one of the most popular booths in the vendor area being put right at the front. And that one, which is Hacker Warehouse, that one was generating its own massive line because they're a massive attraction in some senses. And so you had all of these things that placed large lines into the hallway. And then what happened was that initial rush of everyone trying to get to merch and everyone trying to get to vendors eventually clears out, and that hallway became completely tenable. Like it was totally fine.
Completely tenable.
And it was just because of that initial rush. So that sucked. The problem is like it's either that or you still have the vendor area lines, but once you're done, you have to walk 20 minutes to maybe go get a soldering station.
The next one.
Right?
Yep.
These are the two extremes. And which of those is better? I don't think either of them is good, but this is the practicality of it. You got to do something. So
yeah, I think you fail and you fail better. And this isn't like, this is what hackers do. Like, but I do believe like you have to make those mistakes in order to figure it out. And another example of this is like the during like the vendor area, for instance, had the vendor line and then the Hacker Warehouse line, and the Hacker Warehouse line went down that hallway right past IoT. Yeah. Fire code doesn't allow them to have two lines, so now you have one line for both IoT and Hacker Warehouse. And I think there's this pendulum. No. It was but then on top of that though, like it's not without DEF CON recognizing this from years before. It's not like, they're figure it out. Like it's not, and I say that like it's not like you can look at DEF CON and go, DEF CON's just like, screw the people, they're figure it out. Because look at the strides that were taken for merch this year. Like
Yeah.
a Hacker Tracker, which used to be kind of like Hacker Tracker. I like
Love
what you're
'em.
doing. Your name sucks because every time I hear Hacker Tracker, it sounds like it's tracking hackers. Like it's like everyone has an air tag and we're tracking them around the map. I'm sorry, paranoid person in me.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that's the point. Like, you got to appreciate like the absurdity of it.
Tongue in cheek.
Yeah, maybe that it probably is. I also just like the fact that they're developing this thing. I think is awesome. But
Yeah,
what
it's
they
amazing.
did is for merch, they had all the products of merch, so you could go and create your own personal shopping cart within Hacker Tracker. Walk up to the merch and say, "This is what I want," without like window gazing of going, "Oh, I think I might do this." So it pushed the line faster.
Oh,
But then
yeah.
they go, "Okay, we've gotten that figured out, but here's the other aspects we have to figure out." So like, that would be like, I think in some ways I go, let's make a video on here's all the advice of things we would change.
Mm.
But on the other side of things, I go, I think a lot of it, you figure it out. So going back to they're figure it out. It's not we'll figure it out. It's using Gowry's quote is, we'll figure it out because there's no evidence to the contrary that we won't in the future. We have every other time. We'll figure it out in the future. Gowry?
So, just if we want to get back to culture and how a lot of the culture from 10 years ago, I'll say it's not that it's no longer needed, but society has moved on. I brought this up. I wanted to discuss this on stream very, very quickly because it shows you the direction of general society and how things have changed. And why some of the counterculture at DEF CON arguably has helped change these things for the better, and why the counterculture is just becoming culture now. There is language in the National Defense Authorization Act this year with regards to the use of marijuana or cannabis and the acquisition of a security clearance. And there's always been this, it's been a bad, it's been something that the government has struggled with former drug users wanting to get into cybersecurity, wanting to get into these roles, but not being able to get a clearance because of what they're doing. And Silk had the text up. I want to read a small excerpt. It basically says the prohibition on denial of eligibility for access to classified information solely because of past use of cannabis. That's a weird way to state this, but basically it says that if you want to get into a job that requires you to get a security clearance, notwithstanding any other provision of law, quote unquote, the head of an element of the intelligence community may not make a determination to deny eligibility for access to classified information to an individual based solely on the use of cannabis by the individual prior to the submission of the application for a security clearance of the individual. Why is that relevant? I joked because that plus the apparent we're about to get a rescheduling of marijuana from 1 to 3, whatever that means. It basically says that it has medical use. The day of government hackers with medical marijuana cards is upon us. Like, it's going to be a thing in the coming years. I'm serious, and
yeah.
that's going to be a thing.
What I'm laughing at is I can't pull it up because of chat being weird. That was in the description for this video. It is now upon us, and I think it's so true. I think though, like, in some ways, none of this it doesn't make any difference, and I mean that as kind of like a weird way of it's a good thing, but like I think you kind of have to do this. Like, and more companies are changing the way they have employee contracts to open them up. One, because they're not enforceable, but two, open it up so you can do side projects and get to own it. Like, if you're a programmer and things like that, there's other lines there. But like, if you're just like a security consultant and you develop your own tool, like, I think more and more companies are going to, you can own your own product.
California, I think by law, now bans that blanket we own everything. type situation. And so that's why a lot of companies are changing, because they have to due to California state law. But like the point I was trying to make was, like, there was this whole counterculture of, I want to party, I want to do drugs, I want to do all these things, and I don't want to be held down by the man. The man is starting to change his opinion on what's allowable, right? Like that counterculture from 20, 30 years ago is influencing the culture by and large, I would say, for the better. One of my friends, you listen year after year after year of these various government agencies begging people to apply to jobs, like help, we need help, we need you hackers to help us,
like
they're
the
a big
TSA
problem.
at DEF CON.
Right, and they're begging people to come help them, and it's like, the counterculture is like, yeah, but not unless you change these things. I want to be able to smoke weed every day or something like that. It's like, it's actually changing the way the system works. You just got it takes a few decades.
It
Like
takes a few decades.
that consistent feedback over time causes the system to change. And as it changes, yeah, the rest of the culture is going to say, hey, maybe don't smoke weed every day, because that's probably bad for you, right? Like, maybe don't walk around with 40s taped to your hands. It's probably awful for your liver. Do it if you want, but like, I don't think we should celebrate it, right? Like, anyway, this last
Gator.
little bit on culture. Culture's changing.
No,
The culture is changing.
there was another topic. I'll hand it to Gator, and then I'll open it up for a new topic, because I have one. Gator?
So the whole hackers being able to use marijuana and possibly being able to get hired with the government is going to be an interesting culture change. I don't think it's necessarily for a bad, because, like Gowrie said, government agencies have been hiring at DEF CON for years. Everybody's hiring at DEF CON. You got to go talk to people, right? They've been asking for help. I think going through and having to do their background and be able to make sure that you're this is going to be an interesting culture change, and I don't necessarily think it's for the worse, because there are so many situations where if you admit that you have a problem, then hey, it's okay, we'll get you on a plan and everything will be fine. But being able to get your foot in the door is going to help change things a bit.
Yeah.
For better, for worse, we're going to see. It's going to be 20, 40 years, but hey, make sure that you're logging everything, because that's going to be the important part. So
I don't. Part of me goes, I don't think it's not going to change anything. Legitimately, I don't think there's any change whatsoever. I think there's that, due to prior use, because you have all these like states that were giving out misdemeanors and things like that for carrying it.
right.
But I honestly don't think it's going to change all that much, because the thing I'll appreciate with it is that at least it can be like, oh, you eat like a brownie or a gummy or something like that at that, like, versus like the people who actually upset and annoyed me were the smokers when I was working at one of my prior employers, because every hour it was like a 40-minute break for smoking and you never saw them. And it was like,
Right.
guys, like you can't just do that. Like, I was considering picking up smoking just so and then like, and my manager was doing it too. So all of a sudden I'm like, in order for me to get ahead, do I need to pick up smoking? So that was
So funny you say that, because when I was in the military, I want to bring this up. When I was in the military, it was it was a point of contention constantly that the smokers were almost never in the office while the non-smokers were doing all of the work. And it got to the point where the non-smokers would take, quote unquote, a smoke break every time a smoker would take a smoke break, to just go with them to hang out and chat. Right. And then the management caught on as to what was happening, and the non-smokers were no longer allowed to do that, but the smokers could still do it. There's always been a culture there. And eventually the military is, by and large, really put its foot down on tobacco use in general. But yes, that was a thing that happened in the Navy too. So,
and to another point on owning your side projects, I will say 2 employers ago, having to go through, and even though I work in California, I was working for somebody else who was based in another state, and they're like, the verbiage was there, we own everything, and I'm like, nah, I'm not signing this. I need to make sure that I run a hackerspace, I do other tools outside, I work in open source. You can't own this. And it had to go through the entire process but I have the president of that company signing off saying, "Oh, we'll modify your agreement to make sure
Yep.
that's not included." So make sure you're checking the fine print, folks.
I always like to say, like, 2 lines here. When you're going into a job where they really need you for your skill set, which is almost every job within cybersecurity, everything is negotiable. And if they say it's not negotiable, then they're lying, because then they're lying, because everything is always negotiable, right? It's just arbitrary words on a piece of paper. You can absolutely change that piece of paper. It's just a matter of how bad they want or need you. It's always negotiable. Never sign something that you don't want to sign unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah, the unsolicited piece of advice there too is even make sure you get it in writing. Right, contracts are not there to dictate the terms of the relationship. Contracts are there for when crap hits the fan and you need to go to the governing doc to say this is what the response is. Example on this: if you do this, you like having clear consequences in a contract is incredibly important, because it's like, then this is how you determine damages. I like contract law. I have a lot of fun with it, but it's like you have to articulate damages. Also, big one in here is everything is a contract. It doesn't matter if it's verbal. It doesn't matter if it's written on the back of a napkin. It doesn't matter if it's an email. People go, oh, well, I have to sign it. No, if you make a declaration in an email and you put your name on it and they respond back, that is still a contract. Now, whether or not it's enforceable, whether there are damages and all of that, like, always,
That's for the lawyers.
it is still a contract. Like, it's just there. I don't think we have time for the last topic I want to talk, but it's a huge one to unpack. And it's Apple walked away and retracted their CSAM initiative. So what this is, I'll be more vague here, which is CSAM, I forget what it stands for. In short, we'll say it's images that you should not have on your phone, or images or that type of material that is gross and dirty.
It is illicit material that exploits the younger small
generation
people in society. Yes, the young people in society.
Which is like I don't even like talking about it. It's so gross.
Yeah, I hate it. I hate talking about it.
Everything about it. Special place.
This is the other way that it's been stated as well, with one word dropped from it for what the CSAM stands for, but child abuse material is the easiest way to go about touching it.
Right,
there we go. Child abuse material. So what it was is it came down from the government, which said, hey, you need to stop this information within iCloud, which I think everyone in the world would say, yes, anything that can be done should be done. And then it was like, well, the way that actually happens is we have to backdoor your iCloud account. So we're not doing that. So they started going down a really interesting path, which was your phone, your iPhone has AI in it, has an AI chip. It has the ability to determine faces. This is why if I say, like, one of my kids' names in my phone, it can pull up all the pictures of them. So convenient, so nice. And using that same functionality on the chip for the data to never leave the phone to detect these images and then report the images up, so they don't have to backdoor all your storage to get in it. It's still encrypted end to end, but there's this. And the more I read it, the more I was like, oh, that's an interesting concept. But the reason why Apple started stepping back from it is they're like, there is so much abuse that could be done with this type of functionality use, like, to find, like, even just like find the most wanted list and have all the phones search through pictures for that. And Apple stepped back saying, we can't, we're not doing this. Like, effectively, we're not doing this. And there's this whole argument to be had versus privacy and security. And I know that's like a huge debate, but it is kind of we're moving towards more interesting ways of doing this. And that's why I thought that was fascinating. It wasn't just we're going to backdoor your iCloud account, but like, we're going to use a specialized chip in your phone to do this so the data never leaves. I found it interesting. And I was wondering what your guys' thoughts were.
I think, so in the context of the material that we're talking about, It's always incredibly contentious because of the first statement you said, which is, I think we should do anything and everything in order to weed this out and get rid of those predators, right?
Mhm.
But there's all kinds of problems in actually engineering a solution that does this without violating the rights of those same, the same children, teenagers taking selfies of themselves. This happens on an everyday basis.
Mhm.
If they have an iPhone and they report, and that system reports it as child abuse material, all of a sudden it creates a legal problem where it's a kid being stupid, right?
Yep.
That's just the simplest example that I can come up with.
Well,
but there's all
parent
kinds
taking
of
pictures
problems
of their kids. Parent taking pictures of their kids in innocent ways.
Yeah, whatever the case is, right? Like there are all kinds of thought experiments that you can come up with where this creates engineering this solution, if you could do it, probably creates more problems than it solves, and it imperils both the security and the privacy of the users of the software and the hardware. And so I can definitely see the argument both for and against these things, and it's a very hard place to draw a line. Like there's a line where you have to draw a line somewhere. Like you can't just use the slippery slope argument and say it goes on forever. No, you will draw the lines somewhere. It's going to be arbitrary, but that you have to, because otherwise society can't operate. And Apple saying like, look, we tried it, we looked at it, we have to draw the line. We can't do this because it causes too many security and privacy problems. I don't think that is a knock on Apple's dedication to weed out these perpetrators. I think it is mostly just a matter of practicality, where there is a line where once you cross it, the privacy and security of a device is fundamentally compromised and could be co-opted in a variety of ways. If the government just came in and said, we're requisitioning your system, we're manifest destinying your ass and taking your software, their users are going to be real unhappy about the things that the government is suddenly capable of using that system to do. And I think it's totally reasonable from a security and a privacy perspective to say, we could do this, we shouldn't do this because of those other risks. And I think that is, and I talk about it in the sense of like the US government. Think about China. Like if China figured out a way to just co-opt the system, hell yeah, they're going to use the shit out of it.
Yeah, and I think that the other thought is like, AI is not to that point where it can even like make the determinations. Even if it could do it, there's no way it can actually like make a determination. And then the models that
it can make a determination that this picture is not of a hot dog, though.
Yes, this is not a hot dog. I mean, the one thing which actually starts getting like really weird, because I found the article on like Mac Rumors or something like that, and started going down this path of like, okay, cool, like how has it been done before, and them talking about models. And I realized it came across another article that like, was it the FBI actually ran one of these sites for a long time, legitimately just to scrape data. And it's such a, it's such a weird...
The context there is they did not create the site.
Mm-hmm.
They raided and gained control of and allowed it to continue operating in order to identify other perpetrators. So it's not like that conspiracy. Yeah, it's not like that conspiracy theory where they were like the CIA imported cocaine in order to create the crack crisis, right? Like it's not that bad.
It becomes weirder and weirder because we're living in such a goofy age of, you now have the ability to generate images and things like that. So like, where does that fit into it's the more you think about this topic, the grosser it gets, and then the harder it gets for them to ever enforce it. So I'm just like, that's all we're going to talk about.
And disgusting. The future is scary and disgusting.
It's scary and disgusting. And I'll spin back to our original topic, which I think is a perfect one to end on. I almost fell out of my chair hearing this guy rant for like 10 minutes. Like, and again, some of it's justified, some of it I don't think is all. There's parts of it I just got very upset at. But one I just almost died for. Evil Mofo, Dual D. Yeah, oh gosh, hold on. I'm missing. Zara. Like, oh my gosh, so many people at Scav Hunt. You need this message. This message is for you. The guy goes on a 15-minute rant, and then he goes like on just all the ways DEF CON was bad and all of that, and then he pulls out the Scav Hunt list. He's like, yeah, but these guys, this is a really cool contest. Like, legitimately rants for like 10 minutes, and then he's like, but these guys, they're okay. This was a ton of fun. You should do Scav Hunt. Just phenomenal.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious for a variety of reasons. One, because like Scav Hunt's been there for so long and is integral to a lot of the shenanigans that have occurred at DEF CON. But it's also like the perfect gateway to become the 10%, part of the 10%, if you will, where it's just like, oh, here's this list of things, and it will generate stories and it, give back to the culture, this subculture at DEF CON. But it's really funny. DEF CON used to be this. However, let me open up one of the lists from the oldest contests at Scav Hunt or at DEF CON and be like, this is how you should do DEF CON. Well, apparently DEF CON is still doing Scav Hunt, so it must not be that bad in terms of culture.
It was just so awesome. Like, he just goes on this big rant. He's like, but these guys are okay. You should definitely do things. Oh, it was just like phenomenal. With that, go on, Gator.
I was going to say, with that, I mean, everybody's got their experience, right? And I hope his experience next year is going to be better. I hope he comes back, and if he just goes and plays the Scav Hunt, that's a great onboarding. And we can all make memories from going through and doing that.
It's a bonding experience.
Did you know, I believe, let me make sure I'm exactly right, but I think we placed 5th.
We placed 5th.
Scav Hunt.
We totally did. I am so jazzed about that. And the funny part is, I think
we weren't even trying.
And here's the other piece. I'm wondering by technicality if we bumped up to 4th. And the only reason I say this is because on Twitter, like since the contest is officially closed, I turned in 2 more, which was like during like a Twitter post, and Emo Mofo goes like, he responded, he's like, got it, recorded it.
I will say, one of the other things I loved about this year, and I didn't realize because working the conference versus watching y'all's videos and seeing that the pictures online, between 2 spanning trees as a riff on In Between Two Ferns, the web series that Scav Hunt was doing, I thought was absolutely, since they were streaming and a podcast, I thought that was absolutely just amazing. Love it.
I have my biggest cringy moment of the conference. So they sat down in front. I didn't realize exactly what they were doing at that. And then there was the entry on the Scav Hunt list to introduce yourself as consistently moist to Silk on stream. And so they sat somebody down to do it with Silk on stream. And prior in the day, somebody came up to Silk and said, I'm like persistently moist. Or something. They said it wrong.
Constantly.
It was constantly moist. And my brain, a thing flipped in my brain where all of a sudden I thought the Scav Hunt entrance, the Scav Hunt entry said constantly moist instead of consistently moist. And so when they sat down on spanning trees to do this on stream, the guy said it right and introduced himself to Silk as consistently moist. And I didn't realize what was going on. So I yelled like, that's not what it says. And I've been kicking myself in the butt ever since then, because he was doing it perfectly. And I feel like I just ruined that moment on stream. I felt so bad, but biggest cringy moment of the conference for me.
No. I think you're remembering it wrong. He was saying it wrong, and you corrected him.
He said consistently moist. Because afterwards, he said it right, and I just fucking ruined that portion of the stream. I felt really bad.
I will say I have all of those videos, and I do have an idea for a video on that, but I have all the clips of people introducing themselves as consistently moist. And it's just like, I look back at those videos and I cannot help but laugh every time. I feel like I'm just super cringy in them, but like, especially when I'm like looking at the person, like licking my lips, like trying to get them to break, because the role was introduce yourself to Silk as consistently moist. and don't with a straight face. So obviously anything we could do, me and Gowrie could do to get them to crack is happening. But like, it felt so cringy watching the videos, but I am just laughing at people just coming up. You're like, I am consistently moist. And you're like, ah.
Sounds
This
like
is
you
the
had a
worst
collection of consistently moist.
Worst hacker handle in existence. Consistently moist. This
Between
Ode
that-
brought to you by Consistently Moist.
Oh gosh, that one. It's that one, and then the other one, which I have never laughed so hard in my life, like 2 times at DEF CON this year, which were both highlights. One was this worst hacker handle ever, and I'm so glad it eventually came onto the scav hunt list. The other one was Gowrie's message on, like, he showed me a clip from like Family Feud from forever ago, which was something you lick but don't bite. And the woman just like, you see her brain just completely just crash and goes, hot dog.
Yeah, she says hot dog. And everyone's just like, she was definitely thinking about something else. And Steve Harvey was like, we about to get canceled. Oh my God.
Oh gosh. With that, Winter, hey, welcome back to the end of the stream. With that, my gosh, I miss you guys. I'm so happy we got to do stream. We'll start with Gator. Gator, what are your final thoughts?
Man, be the change that you want to see at DEF CON. I'm still getting involved, still playing, because I love being able to get that feedback. I will say I've got more energy this year from all the new folks coming, and the energy that they brought in this year was absolutely amazing. Love seeing the new faces, getting more people inside of the culture, and I want to make sure that we're all spreading that love to our hacker family.
Gowrie?
Delete computers, return to monkey.
I think for me, there's always this pendulum shift that happens at DEF CON. It's always from either like you can be productive or you can be creative, and you cannot, if you try and do both, you just kind of fail at both. And I think what happens with DEF CON is there's like the planning years and then the growth years. And I think this year was just like that transitional year of them figuring it out. And as always, I'm always excited about next year's DEF CON. I will obviously be there pending pending nothing. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you all. Thanks for watching, and hack on.